Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this session. My name is David Tweedale. I'm a strategic partner account manager here at Mimecast, and I have the privilege of managing our long-established relationship with Shaw International. Shaw are the exclusive Mimecast partner in the offshore jurisdiction, and I'm thrilled that they've invited me to this session today to talk about what I think is a really interesting topic, which is recognizing Microsoft's success in moving their infrastructure and their customers' infrastructure away from a traditional on-premises Exchange environment into the cloud with Office 365 and now Microsoft 365. And specifically, how their success in executing on that mission statement to get their customers into the cloud has created what we'll call an intractable problem. And specifically, I'm going to talk about how Mimecast and via our partners, Shaw International, and Mimecast tools around email security and cyber resilience can help to solve the problem that many of our customers have faced as they've made that move into Office 365. So there's three key things that we're going to cover in the next 20 minutes or so. And first is just recognizing how Microsoft's success is actually inextricably linked to the threat that it now sees because of the dependency it's created and the subsequent targeting that it receives from threat actors. Understanding how email is the #1 threat vector, and because of that, it's really important to recognize how email problems transcend the gateway perimeter, and we need to be very careful about how we do email security. So a bit about Microsoft 365 first, for anyone that isn't quite yet aware of their platform. Essentially, what Microsoft has successfully built is the #1 greatest business productivity toolkit that's ever been made. Got a huge number of services that allow users to do their jobs effectively. The three key components for any Microsoft 365 customer are Office 365, 220 million business users on Office 365 already, enterprise mobility, and of course, Windows 10, which most of us use today. Now, Microsoft's #1 priority as an organization is to get users onto their cloud services. And it's easy to understand why customers would do that. They get amazing functionality across a large number of areas, much more functionality than they did in an on-premise world. They can improve business productivity. They get automatic updates, far easier to manage than the old software assurance days. And they get improved economies of scale, which you'd expect from any move from an on-prem perpetual licensing into subscription-based cloud services. So what's this intractable problem that I keep mentioning? Well, actually, Microsoft's success and amazing continued success in moving customers to 365 has created a catch-22 for itself and its customers. The more successful that Microsoft becomes, the riskier Microsoft 365 becomes for its customers. And there are a few reasons why. Firstly, is if you think about the size of the attack surface, Microsoft already have 220 million business users on Office 365, and this is increasing daily. Every user that's added means more data is added to M365, which increases the cash prize for anybody that is able to successfully crack the protection that wraps around Microsoft's cloud services. And even COVID-19 hasn't slowed them down. In the first month of lockdown, there was an increase in Teams adoption by over 40% in just 1 month. So they're extremely successful at moving customers in this direction. But every single time a new customer moves over, the attack surface gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The old way of keeping Exchange safe, you only have to think about your own Exchange box. And we've got thousands and thousands of customers' data all in one place. What that's also created is dependency on a single vendor because Microsoft is using Microsoft to protect Microsoft. The adoption of Microsoft 365 and the financial pressure that they put on their customers means that a herd culture has been created. More people are willing to accept that Microsoft security is probably okay. They're happy to accept that Microsoft is resilient enough to look after their data. And Microsoft has invested lots of money and time into security features, certainly more than it ever has done before. And some of them genuinely are excellent. However, what this means is that for lots of organizations, people are sitting behind the same level of protection as to all of their colleagues in different organizations that are also under that M365 platform. So it's not hard to imagine why Microsoft is such a high priority for cyber criminals. And email exchange online, as it is in 365, remains at the heart of that attack surface. Because even with the growth of things like Slack, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, email remains the #1 collaboration tool. And it remains the #1 threat vector, the #1 vehicle for cyber criminals that are trying to infect an organization. 94% of IT breaches will start off with an email attack in some way, shape, or form. And what we continue to see across those 20,000 customers that we have that are using M365 is continued and increasing amounts of phishing, malware, and spam that's specifically aimed at Microsoft 365. What we also know is that Microsoft are the most spoofed brand in the world. There's hundreds of fake Microsoft domains made every single day to support the kinds of phishing campaigns that we're seeing attack our customer base that's using M365. So what do these attacks look like? Well, between 2018 and 2019, we recognize a huge increase in email campaigns that were specifically targeted at Microsoft Office. And this is the kind of Microsoft phishing campaign that lots of people have probably already seen. Somebody's pretending to be Microsoft, they're saying, hey, please can you update your password? You put your password in, and now that cyber criminal is able to attack the Microsoft Office stack. They can log into all of the different parts of your Office 365 house, which are protected by those same credentials. But we've also seen a significant increase in email attacks that are targeting SharePoint and OneDrive. And I think this is interesting because this is showing how cyber criminals are reacting to the continued growth of Microsoft. They're not just attacking the core piece, which is Office, which they know most customers have. They're starting to go over after other areas of M365 with SharePoint and OneDrive, because more and more customers are moving onto these platforms, and they're again protected by the same credentials that they use for that traditional Office base. And typically, these SharePoint and OneDrive directed attacks are about delivering malicious files and URLs into those services. Now, I'm sure none of this is news to you. All of us have heard about Office 365 breaches. You will have, I'm sure, so have your colleagues, so have your customers, so have we at Mimecast, and significantly, so have the cyber criminals. On your screen now, I'm flicking through lots of different headline attacks and breaches in Office 365 and unfortunate moments in Microsoft's journey into the cloud. This is all public stuff, and hackers will always go for the weakest part. The increased volume of attacks targeting specifically at 365 shows that it's a more and more attractive proposition for hackers to go after. And this creates a snowball that just continues to roll. Microsoft 365 gets more customers, so the attack surface gets bigger and becomes more attractive to hackers. So more customers get breached, and then we find out about it. So the bigger attack surface is now even more attractive to hackers. But Microsoft will continue to add customers, so that attack surface gets bigger. Even more customers get breached, the attacks continue to flow. And we go round and round that cycle, which unfortunately the customers pay the price for. Because the real consequence of this is that efficacy suffers. Efficacy is the measure of how good a security provider is at stopping bad things happening. And the security built into the M365 perimeter is simply unable to manage the increasing threat to its integrity. And our customers are suffering for it. Because even if Microsoft had the best security solution in the world, there's no way that we should expect them to be able to keep themselves safe from this amount of attention that they're receiving from cyber criminals. So here at Mimecast, we regularly run what we call an email security risk assessment. And what we'll do is essentially journal mail that's been approved by Microsoft as safe. So it's gone through EOP and ATP and been marked as legitimate. And we'll see if we can catch anything that they've missed. And in 2019, we aggregated all of the different ESRAs that we ran for lots of different customers. And what we saw is a massive 28% of the emails that EOP and Advanced Threat Protection marked as safe, Mimecast would have caught as malicious. So efficacy is suffering as a consequence of Microsoft's continued growth. But don't just take our word for it, because it's really not just us saying this. SE Labs have now published 2 consecutive reports over a couple of years, scoring Microsoft really poorly for efficacy. And both Gartner and TechTarget have specifically recognized that Microsoft is continuing to suffer from this intractable problem that its success has created. The bigger it gets, unfortunately, the more pressure it's under, and the more times it will be caught out by cyber criminals that are really invested in getting what's behind that single lock that Microsoft is using to protect itself. So let's recap on where we are so far, on what this intractable problem actually is. Microsoft 365 is a transformational platform, and email remains the center of mass within that cloud service. So it continues to be the #1 threat to you guys as customers. Microsoft's success in moving their customers across from an on-premise infrastructure into the cloud has made it the #1 target for cyber criminals by quite some distance. And it's created a herd culture and a dependency culture, which makes it increasingly attractive for hackers that are trying to penetrate it. With those two things together, email within Office 365 is an area that needs massive, massive protection. And unfortunately, despite massive improvements from Microsoft and investment in their security tools, at the moment, the cyber criminals are doing a very, very good job of exploiting Microsoft's intractable problem, as we can see by their continual decline in efficacy. But the reality is that we can't and we shouldn't expect Microsoft to face this problem alone. As I said earlier, even if they had absolutely the best security tools in the marketplace, there's no way we should expect themselves to keep themselves safe from such an overwhelming pressure from cyber criminals. So the need for dedicated and specialized cybersecurity technologies in the email space is now more important than it's ever been. So let's talk a little bit about the ways in which you might be vulnerable. And we organize these risks in 3 different zones here at Mimecast. Zone 1 is the obvious, which is the perimeter, the traditional way that we see security. So spam, viruses, things trying to get into the organization from the outside. This is where many of us, Microsoft included, typically stop with our security tools. But the risk is increasing in the second layer, which we call Zone 2. Here, the risks are inside your network. It's human error, internal compromise and carelessness, and the lateral spread of an infection across internal users. And then finally, we have Zone 3. This is happening well away from the perimeter and the users inside of it, but here the risk is to your brand. So here we've got the risk of somebody misusing your brand to exploit other people, perhaps by spoofing the domain that you own or spinning up a website that looks very similar to one of your domains. And the risk across these 3 zones is exacerbated by the fact that lots of customers have been forced into acquiring point solutions which aren't integrated with one another, they're not automated, and they're not working together in tandem to solve these very real customer issues. So, as a summary slide, Microsoft have become the #1 cloud application for very good reason. They've developed an amazing tool that provides lots of different value and the ultimate productivity toolkit in many ways. But it's really important that we recognize that their success has created risk. So we have to keep ourselves safe from the threat that they face from the increased attention from threat actors trying to penetrate their systems. We have to make sure we keep Microsoft 365 resilient by having that true continuity and control. Protect against web threats and shadow IT with that web security angle, as well as thinking about the email problem. Keep that data secured safely so you can successfully store, manage, and recover data outside of Office 365, just like you would have traditionally done in an Exchange on-prem world, and really extend that protection across email security, web security, continuity, and email archiving. The 2 things that we do to do that are Email Security 3.0 and our Cyber Resilience extensions. That's all from me. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. If you do have any questions, any feedback, or if there's anything that I've gone through today which you'd like to discuss in more detail, then I'd like to ask you to please contact Joe over at Shaw. He heads up the sales team in the Isle of Man. So I've got a couple of email addresses on the screen now if you want to drop Joe and his team a note. But from me, thanks again so much for your time and attention, and I look forward to meeting you all soon. Thanks very much.